Out of the street corners they scream. You knew it was coming. You've been waiting for this for months. Rumour hardened into fear and now they scream at you. The sirens, their hysterical wail tearing through the white noise of the city. And you run. You run to pick up those things that can never be replaced. A picture of them in the days when they still loved you. Your mother's wedding ring. And then you turn to your shelf of games. You only have room for 5. 5 games for Doomsday. 5 Games for Doomsday is a show in which board game personalities are thrust into a cabin in the woods to outrun an oncoming disaster, but can only take 5 of their games with them. But which will they choose? My guest this week is a person who believes in face-to-face human interaction. One of the world's leading designers of educational LARPs, or edu-LARPs, she's also a teacher of game design and an advocate for the role of games in making the world a better place. My guest this week is Josefin Westborg. Josefin, welcome to the cabin.
Thank you. How nice it is to be here.
Yeah, I mean, to be in a room with me is fairly torturous for anyone, I assume. But, you know, the woods are nice.
Yep, I mean, you get used to it. You can look at the nice view through the windows and pretend you see nice things.
Exactly, like zombies. So I guess my first question is, how difficult was it for you to choose the 5 games to take to the cabin?
It was kind of hard because I did what I guess most people do, try to interpret what kind of answers you wanted and how to react to the whole question. Should I have games with mostly just high replayability, or should I go for games I like, or should I go for what is typically me, or should I try to game the game as I am a player? So, and I kept going around, and then I ended up with a little bit of everything, I think. So I think we'll see more of that.
I mean, to what degree do you see this as an exercise of curation, saving the sort of great works so they live on into the future?
Well, I guess you can see it like that, and some of the games would be that for me, but that's not why I chose them. I thought more about what would I like to do if I actually were caught in a cabin. More my personal perspective.
And how are you with sort of self-sufficiency? How are you with long periods of solitude? Are you someone who craves company, or would something like the apocalypse be fine for you because you could sit with your own company forever?
Oh God, no. I suck at being alone. I really, really want company and are very social. But at the same time, I mean, I'm physically a pretty small person. I'm not very strong, and I'm not very good in from that perspective. But I've also been in the Scouts. I know how to do something at least to survive. So I got some of it, but I also have charm, and I have a lot of friends that are really into the whole apocalypse thing on the level they have guns, which in Sweden is very, very uncommon, and they have their bag-out bags and everything. So I think I'm pretty set if I actually survive the catastrophe and don't die there.
And so you say that you live with these people who sort of have bug-out bags and things. Is that normal in Sweden? Are people expecting the apocalypse every 2 seconds?
No, I would not say that. I think I just have prepper friends. So I would not say it's normal. It also depends. I would say my partner grew up in the country. So I mean, he knows loads of stuff, because in the country you kind of have to, because then all of a sudden there's a storm, you have no electricity, and you need to deal with stuff. But then I also have a lot of nerdy friends that are just really into the preppers thing. So I think it's more my friends than a standard thing in Sweden.
And so, I mean, I know it's very difficult to generalize and things, but you seem to notice this trend. When you go sort of further north, people tend to be more reserved, more restrained. Are Swedish people outgoing? Are they gregarious? Or are you somewhat unique?
I would say it depends on how drunk they are. No, that's not totally true. I would say a lot of people are outgoing, but also a lot of people are shy. And I think we don't have that everyday interaction, like saying hello to someone you see on the street that you don't know is just weird. Like, why would you do that? And within your like friends group, you can be very social and do a lot of things, but it's hard to make new friends, I think, in Sweden and, well, the Nordic countries overall in many ways. So you need to find a way to get to know someone, like start a hobby or play board games, because then once you have an in, you're good. But the whole random social thing, well, not as good. Yeah.
And so, when people talk about the Nordic countries, and Sweden is often used as an example, they're these sort of utopias of sort of social justice and equal rights and social mobility, and there's no poverty and there's no homelessness, and everyone is treated well by the state and everyone else, and it's this sort of paragon that can be demonized by certain parts of a sort of weird American conservative side. But to what degree is that true? To what degree is Sweden sort of the acme of social democracy, would you say?
Well, that depends on. I mean, we're slowly going downhill, trying to become more American, I guess, which is right now not a good thing. We have, as the rest of Europe right now, quite strong right-wing winds blowing through the country. One of our biggest parties used to be a straight-out Nazi racist party. Now they're cleaned up their act, but I mean 15 years ago they were actually howling in the streets. So we have our problems, but it's also hard to look at since you're part of the society. For me, it's shocking when I talk to people outside of the Nordic countries and you hear what they pay for like having a kid. That's like the amount of money is hard for me I can't even have an idea about that. For my friends, they had a complicated situation when they have their kids, and all in all, they paid 30 euros that was for the dad staying over at the hospital and getting food. The rest was free. So, of course, a lot of it is really good, but there is also problems. So I wouldn't say it's perfect, but so far from what I hear, I do prefer a lot of this version, but a lot of things needs to be fixed also.
So I want to go back to the beginning then. And, you grew up in Sweden and you got into gaming. What is the gaming scene like in Sweden? Because I live in Germany and it's sort of integral to family life. People are very familiar with games from childhood. Is that the same in Sweden, or is it something more of a niche sort of nerd thing?
Somewhere in between, I would say. I would not say it's the same as in Germany, that all families play board games and have fun. Most families probably have, but then they played Monopoly. They have not played a lot more board games. So everyone has some kind of relationship to them, but not that much. When I teach at the university, one of the classes I've had were for architects, and out of 80 students, maybe 5 to 10 had played other board games than Monopoly and Trivial Pursuit. So not that many. But I think it's getting less and less niched and weird. And every year the magazines before Christmas have this is the best board games for Christmas. And the last 2 years they've actually asked people who play board games. Before that it was a lot, buy this game, it's great. Like, it's 25 years old and really bad. Why do you pick that one? So it's going in that direction, I would say.
And sort of when did games enter your life? And did you start with sort of Monopoly and Life and that sort of thing? And how did you transition over to the more hobby side of it?
I have, my dad liked games, so I played some games growing up, but it was a lot of like Monopoly and chess and more standard games. But we also played some digital games together. So I had some of it, but I think it was when I actually started LARPing and got more nerdy friends that I started playing more board games and got into it more for real. That's like my way into it was through nerd culture, definitely.
And so you were into LARP before you were into other forms of gaming then?
Yes, even before I started tabletop role-playing. I started more or less with LARPing.
So how did LARP enter your life then?
Well, that is actually a good question because I remember being 11 years old, dreaming about LARPing, and I had no clue how I knew what LARP was when I was 11, because that makes absolutely no sense because no one around me was a LARPer. But I didn't actually start LARPing until I was 17, because that's the first time I got in contact with it at school. I started a new school, and someone there told me they were doing vampire LARPs. And that was not the LARPing I wanted to do. I wanted to do the standard high fantasy, being an elf thing. But I thought, at least this is a way in, so I'm going to go and try this. And that's what I did. And then I kind of got stuck.
And was this, I remember the first time I played Pandemic, I just thought, well, I'm stuck with this hobby now. I kind of have no choice. I was completely enraptured from that moment. Was it the same with you in LARP? When you first started doing it, you thought, oh my God, here I am. I found my thing now.
Not really. I got really into it when I started. But it was not, this is going to be the change of my life. I LARPed very actively for maybe 2 years. Then I took a break and didn't LARP for a couple of years before I came back again. So it was not an instant, this is what I'm going to do. But I definitely had, your first LARP experience is always extremely strong because of how LARP works, and it was the same.
When you say strong, what do you mean?
I would say emotionally intense, because you do something in a way you're not used to. It's this idea of playing someone else, and you're nervous, and you actually physically use your body interacting, and you don't know what's going to happen since you don't have a script. You have no idea where you're going. So you're like, what's going on? I have no clue, and I'm kind of nervous, and I'm also trying to be a character, and everything is happening at once, and it's just a lot of emotions the first time.
And so, you went to university, and then you became a professional LARPer. What was that journey? What did you study at university, and to what degree did that lead you to where you are today? I studied, we have a special type of education in Sweden that is it's a higher education, but it's not a university. It's more a practical education. And I studied one of those in game design because I heard about it and thought it sounded interesting and fun and started studying there. And it's a 2-year education with a quarter of it is an internship. So you go out in the real world and actually work also. So that's where I started off. And one of the first things we did was doing educational games. And apparently I did a role play / LARP that was about teaching 12-year-olds how to do equations. And apparently it was a hit because the ones in charge of this course asked me if I wanted to be hired. And that was 3 weeks in to the education. So I did a couple of math games for them on the side and realized, maybe this is what I want to do, but I want to put more LARP into it because that's what I do. That's what I'm interested in. So I talked to them and they said, well,
maybe it's a good idea to study education also if you want to do educational games. And I thought, that is actually a good idea. So I started doing that. And then I started my own company instead, working with Larp and studied on the side, which I kept doing. So I'm actually just finishing my bachelor's now, just doing the last thing for like 2 months and then I'm done. So I kept going for over 10 years studying on the side since I also have my company. So it wasn't really a planned career choice. It kind of just happened because I turned out to be pretty good at it and thought it was fun.
And how do you feel about the imminent end of your education? Are you excited? Are you dying to get it done? Or are you a little apprehensive about the real world?
Well, since I'm already in the real world and work, it's more about, like, I've been studying on the side for so many years because it's fun. I did it for a while, then I stopped, and I felt, well, I need to start studying again because I need to feel that I evolve and that I question things in the world around me. So I started studying, and then I realized I was more than halfway through my bachelor's and could just like keep going. So it's going to be really weird to not study, and I thought about also keep studying because it's fun, but I'm going to start with just taking a little break and not do 80 things at the same time as I always do. And then maybe I'll keep studying on the side because it's fun.
I mean, do you think we've got it wrong that we, especially sort of in the Western world, we think you study until 21 or, sort of mid-20s or whatever, and then you go into the world of work and then the world of study is behind us. Do you think that it's valuable for us, if the opportunity were available, and of course in a lot of countries it isn't, to continue to study throughout our lives, not just for the purpose of getting a job, for the purpose of being more rounded human beings? Absolutely.
I think that's very important. I mean, I studied for a while, I stopped, and I came back, and I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I think it's great. It really gives me something, and I also know, since it's education I study, when like all of Europe's economy kind of crashed a bit in the 90s, what Sweden did that most countries didn't was they said, well, if you study something, the state will give you extra money because you had loads of people who didn't have a job anymore. And what you could see was that Sweden actually kicked back quicker than most other countries, even if what people studied was not at all what they were going to work with later, even if it was like creative writing and they were not at all in that area. So it's good for the society and it's also good for you as a person. But of course, it's easier like in Sweden, where it's free to study. I don't pay for going to the university, so I can do that on the side and don't have to think about all the money it would cost me.
So your first game then is Qwixx, and this is, one of the first of this new wave of roll and writes, and this is now sort of 8 years old, this game. What do you think the game does well?
I think I wanted a roll and write because I think they're very fun. I grew up on Yahtzee playing that a lot with my mom, and I think it's a good game because you can play it with anyone who is not a gamer at all. It's very, very simple. And I have a lot of the other ones too in that series, and Quantum and the rest of them. But what I like with Qwixx is that it's such a somehow basic level. So it's good to have to play with people who are non-gamers, but also still being interesting with good choices for me that has played it loads of times to not get boring. And I like dice, preferably pretty ones, but even so, there's something. I have so many dice, even if I hardly ever do standard pen and paper role-playing games anymore, it's something about it, and I wanted a game where I have that.
How important is the tactility of games? Because you tend to fall, I tend to fall myself, I'm someone who reviews games, I tend to fall into this idea that games are something that live in the head. And I think that's wrong, broadly speaking. How important is things like throwing dice, that feeling of having something in your hand, manipulating something that's actually in the real world?
I think it's very, very important. And I think we can see that in a lot of the, what do we call them, miniature games. Like, you could have an app for rolling. Why would you roll? Like, it's so hard. It's so much easier to do as a digital game. But they make shitloads of money on that because there is something with the physical touch and just, it's something else. I mean, I loved Wingspan when I played it first time just because of like how the eggs felt, or how just like the texture of the paper in the rule book had me sitting there just touching it and smelling it and just loving it. And I said, I'm going to buy this game. I don't care if it's shit. Then it wasn't, but I didn't know that at the time. I just loved it. So I think it's very important. But I mean, most of the time, if it's a really shitty game, that won't save you even if it helps. But if you have a good game and also have good components in it and the feel and the touch and everything, it will really make it better.
And so, to what degree do you think the role of a gamer is to advocate for games and to sort of evangelize the hobby? And how do you think games like Qwixx help with that?
I don't think it has to be the role of everyone, but I mean, if you like something and you like to do it, you want to share it with people and you want to be able to do it with more people and with more of your friends and let them have that experience. And I think that is something that all gamers or all people who love something want to do. The hard thing is to find a good balance and not be too nerdy about it and don't push when people are not interested to find like what's a good level here, and also finding easy games like Qwixx that is a good way to start. I mean, I played it with my mom the other day and she really got into it and really liked it and it worked great. But I mean, harder games she has a hard time playing when they're more complex because she just, like, the system gets too big. And then it's really good that you have smaller games so she can still see why is this fun. And now she's been playing on her own with her friends, which I love. And it makes me so happy that she actually got into this and now can do that on her own.
So I want to move on now and talk more generally because, I've got an expert in the room. I want to talk about LARPs. And so before we go any further into sort of intricacies of them, how would you define a LARP? What is it?
A LARP is, well, the easiest way to explain it, which is actually the boring way, is to say it's kind of like improv theater, but the big difference is you do not have an audience, which is a very, very important part. It's not made to be looked at, it's made to be experienced, which is also, I think, why most LARPs looks like shit when you try to film them, because they're not made to be viewed. So that would be like my really short, what is a LARP? But it's about taking on a character and portraying it and improvise from that character, not having a script and just going with it.
And so, now you can tell me if I'm being incredibly reductive, but it seems to me LARPs are split into two schools. You have your sort of standard, the thing that is very memeified and that people recognise, the American sort of fantasy LARP where you're throwing the beanbags at people. And then you have these sort of Nordic LARPs which seem to be much more serious and much more self-exploratory. Can you explain those two schools, sort of what they are and what their purposes are, what they set out to do?
Yes, absolutely. I come from the Nordic LARP scene, which is good to know. So I have a different view on LARPs than you might have if you don't do. And Nordic LARP is, as you say, more of a school. It doesn't mean that it has to be made in the Nordic countries. It can be in the school of Nordic LARP. like now we can see that maybe Nordic LARP was not a great way to name that school because it gets very confusing. But now it's kind of got stuck, so we have to deal with it.
Well, it's like Euro games, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Loads of them don't come from Europe, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say the main difference would be, well, if we're going to call them American LARPs, which is not necessarily true because it's also not just in America. You have loads of those games everywhere, but they're more based on system and focused on system, while Nordic LARPs are focused on story. That's how I would say is the main difference. And you can also see this. I listened to the episode where you talked to Stephen, how do you pronounce his name? Bonacor. And when he talked about getting into vampire LARPing, and I thought it was interesting because vampire LARPs in Sweden, I would say, is the most rule-heavy games we have. And I think they're as American as we go most of the time. And then I heard him talk about it, and I realized, wow, he talked about having game master who kind of comes into the games and resolve conflict. We don't have that. Like, I was like, what, why? If you have a system on how to solve the conflict, then you play it out. Why would you have someone coming in and handling it for you? And I realized even our vampire LARPs that are kind of rule heavy are still very much different in how we handle them. We also talk a bit about the concept playing to lose in Nordic LARP, where if I'm going to a standard fantasy LARP, because I could go to a buffer fantasy LARP and it would still be kind of a Nordic LARP here. Because I want to become the next queen. So I'm gonna poison and kill the queen that is right now and take her place. But in an American LARP, that's probably what I also would do, because that's what my character wants to do, and that's what I would do, and I try to do that and somehow win that position. But here, for me, it's like, what is the most interesting story here? If I win and become the queen, that means I'm going to be in shitloads of meeting the rest of the LARP, and that sounds really, really boring. I don't want to be in meetings. So if I try to poison the queen, but I do it really badly, so someone who can see me and stop me, and I can get caught, and then I get thrown into jail, and then I can start this underground movement and try to escape and create a revolution, and that's so much more interesting than just, okay, I became the queen, done. So why would I want to go that way? And that would be playing to lose, because it's more interesting to lose in that situation than to win. So it's all about the story and not about, like, the player's goals and the character's goals don't have to align.
And I'm finding this question difficult to formulate because I don't want to be too reductive here. So I'm going to be super reductive, and you're going to have to forgive me and answer it because you know much more than me. But what's the point? When you go into one of these LARPs, what are you looking to get out of it? Whether it lasts 3 hours or a weekend, when you get to the end of it, what do you want to have got from it?
I would say that depends on who you ask. Even within the scene of Nordic LARPs, I think people want very different things from the LARP. Some want to experience adventure. Some want to just make really nice outfits and walk around feeling cool in their outfits and do kind of a vacation LARP where they kind of are themselves but take on another name. And then for me personally, it's all about the emotional roller coaster. If you made me cry in a corner, laughing hysterically, and do this on repeat for a weekend, I'm going to be so happy. It's all about the drama. Big drama, but believable drama. It's more about telling the big main stories of a year, but smash it into 2 days and play the highlights out big and get the emotional burst out there. That's what I want. Then I don't need to have a lot of drama in my real life. I can get it out there.
And I guess the difference between theatre and LARP is that is for you as the performer. It's not for an audience, as you said, right?
Yes, it's not about how it looks, it's about how it feels when I do it, but also how it feels when I do it together with others, and just like with board games, that all of a sudden it happens things that you didn't see coming. And that's why it's also important to play with others and see, if I do this story, how will that affect the other players? Okay, this will make those, if I'm going to play a bully LARP where I'm supposed to bully someone and then I don't do that, well, the player who thought they were going to get bullied is going to have a shitty LARP. So that is not okay. Then I need to take the responsibility or make sure that someone else is bullying them so they can have that experience. But I still want to focus on having a good time myself. So it's a balance there, trying to find a good way to make the game run.
There's a trite phrase that you learn when you study to be an actor. And I wonder to what degree it applies to LARPs. And this is, acting is reacting, in that you don't go into something, you don't say, I'm going to say my line this way, and regardless of what anyone else on the stage does, I'm just going to perform it in this way. You wait for someone to give you something, you take it, and then you give it back.
Absolutely.
Is that the same thing for LARP?
Yes, absolutely. Very, very well put. I would say that's definitely a lot what LARP is about. And that is also where it goes interesting, to see what happens. And also the kind of, you don't have the pressure of the audience, of delivering. And I mean, some people love to go to LARPs where they don't know anyone, because then they absolutely have no pressure, because then they could more or less be themselves and no one would know, because maybe they were great actors or maybe they're not, but no one knows, so it doesn't matter. And some people prefer to LARP with friends they know, because then they know what kind of gameplay they will have and what they like to do, and they have a safe circle of friends to fall back to if things doesn't work out. So that can vary also.
And finally, there's this view about Nordic LARPs, that they're all very earnest and serious, and everyone's, and they deal with very weighty topics, and while it's a sort of serious artistic pursuit, it seems to be singularly unhumorous, has no sense of humour. Is this an unfair characterization of the scene?
Yes and no. I mean, I've played humor LARPs also, but that is really, really hard to do, because humor is very different in how it works, while working with drama is easier to go with highs and lows. And I would say, you have different parts of the Nordic scene. It's just like with movies. I mean, you have the big blockbuster Harry Potter LARPs stuff going on that is very, in many ways, easy, accessible, and not so hard and deep and emotional. But you also have the really, really art house LARPs where it's all about heavy subjects and emotions. Just if you go to an independent movie viewing, you will probably see totally different thing. Kieslowski's movies are not going to be the same as something Disney does. And it's the same within the LARP scene. And it's also about exploring things that you might not have in your own life and trying to understand them and get a better feel for them and try it out. Just sometimes I talk about LARP to explain why do we do this. That when you're a kid, you can go out to the play yard and you find a slide. And you sit down in the slide and you go, and it's oh my God! Your whole body is just screaming, and it's your stomach is turning upside down and everything is amazing. And then I do that today and it just doesn't do it for me. It's a small slide. It's not that interesting. But that's why we have theme parks. Because it's the same experience we're after. We just need a bit more now as adults. And that's kind of what LARP is. Everyone loved to play make-believe as a kid, running around in the forest. But then people just stop because there wasn't a real alternative of how do I do this now as a grown-up. And that's for me a lot about the art house Nordic LARP scene is about exploring that and get that kind of experience, but in a way that is more catered to adults.
So your next game then is a LARP, and I think this is one that veers into the sort of art house serious topic area, and this is Just a Little Lovin'. So can you explain this LARP, the setting of it?
Yes, Just a Little Lovin' is a LARP about when AIDS hit in the 80s. It has 3 main themes, and that is lust, friendship, and fear of death. So it's definitely one of the more heavier topics, I would say. But it's also, I've been LARPing for 20 years now, and this is the most well-designed LARP I've ever been to.
What does that mean, well-designed?
It's designed to get those 3 main experiences and emotions. The actual LARP is 3 days, and each day have one of the themes as a focus, and they manage to get that experience through and really give you the feeling of that. And there is also, what I like about the game is that you also have a discussion around this, like the topic after and before. And I played it twice, once in Sweden and once in Denmark. And when it was in Sweden, they talked about like how does the laws look in Sweden around this? How do we treat people with HIV and so on? We also have, in the runs I've been in, we've also had players with HIV playing it. Each run talking about like their relationship to it and giving a totally different view on the subject. Even, I thought I knew a lot about it, and I learned so much new things. And it's also about loss. And that is something most people can relate to. Most people have lost someone close to them. And that is things that will come up, because in this LARP people will die, and you will play scenes where people have died, funeral scenes. You have real coffins in this LARP. And that is emotionally incredibly strong. But they also handle it very proper.
So I'm sure that most of the people listening to this haven't participated in LARPs and kind of don't know even the basics of it, and I include myself in that. So this is a 3-day LARP. Can you kind of explain a day to me? What do you do? How is it organised? Are there people there who say you go off with you and blah blah blah? So what is a day on a LARP like this?
In this LARP, what you actually do is you have the first day when you arrive, which is before the LARP, and that's when you workshop. Then you start to workshop about, since this is a LARP with focus also on lust, we're going to play a lot about sex. How do we play on sex? Because we're not going to have sex for real. So we need to have some kind of mechanic for that. So we workshop that so everybody's safe and knows how we're going to handle this. And also techniques for when you want to break the game and say, nope, I'm not comfortable with this, and being able to opt in and opt out. So all of this is, you start workshopping all of this and getting an idea. Then the LARP will start after lunch, in this case. Then you get into character, you dress up, you put on your costume and your makeup and everything. And this LARP is made so you celebrate 4th of July 3 years in a row. So it's 3 days and 3 years, 82, 83 and 84. And first year focus is on lust. Then you have a barbecue, you put up the flag, you sing the national anthem, and you party and you have a great time. And then after a while, you're going to go to bed. And then you play the breakfast, the awkward morning after, where you might have done something your character didn't plan to do, and you need to have breakfast, and it's weird, and it's really fun. After this, in this case, you have what I would call a meta scene, because you're kind of in character, but it's not something that is actually happening in the narrative. in this case, this is the lottery of death. That means all characters sit in a room, you're not allowed to talk, and there's really sad music going on. And after a while, Death shows up. And Death have a hat with him and gives you some paper slips, and you write your name on 1 to 5 pieces of paper and put in the hat. And the number of pieces you put in depends on how much unprotected sex do you think your character will have had during this year to come. So how big of a risk have they taken? And then you put that into the hat, and then they start pulling out notes with names, and everyone who gets their name called out needs to stand up. And no one is still allowed to talk. And then they leave the room. And you have no idea if the people who walked out that room is going to come back again, or if they're dead. Well, their character, of course, not the player. And this is really emotional. They build up to it, and you sit and wait for a very long time, and you don't know what's going to happen. And then you go out, and some of the characters will be back. Some of them just had a scare. Maybe they got an STI and they're fine. Or maybe they have HIV, but they don't know it yet. And some characters won't have made it. They have died during the year. So then you play a funeral scene for those who died. And when that is done, you take a break in the LARP. You go off game again. And you sit in groups and you talk about where you're at emotionally now, how it feels, and just get to share this experience of what happened, since it's usually very emotional. And you do that for about an hour. And then you talk a bit about what happened through this year. You go on lunch, and you change your clothes, and then you start it all over again this evening, but it's 1 year later, and you say, yay, we're gonna have a barbecue, and you do the same thing 3 times.
And so, to what degree, going through this process, does your perspective not just on HIV and AIDS, but on chronic illness and death, how does that change your perspective on these fundamental aspects of human life?
For me, I choose to go to this LARP first time because I was really uncomfortable going to LARPs where you were supposed to play on sex. And I thought, I want to try this out and see how this mechanics works for me, and really try to push myself a bit. But I also knew it was going to be a lot about death. And me personally, my dad died in cancer when I was 18. I've had a lot of experience of death in my life, and that is something I'm comfortable with. I'm not afraid of sorrow. I know what it is and I can handle it. But it was very clear during this LARP that those are things that will come up within me. So I know after we played, was it the second day? And we were sitting in this circle after and talking, and a lot of us were crying because it brings back memories from different funerals you've been to and so on. And I heard one girl share her experience, and she said, I've never lost anyone in my life, so I don't know what this feels like. And for me, this gives me at least a slight idea of what this can be, and it's really tough and hard, but it's also interesting to see what it can be, and maybe it helps me and prepares me for if I actually have to handle that situation, or I will have to handle that situation later. And at the same time, I was sitting crying over my best friend that got hit by a car and died when I was 17. And I remember being really pissed off at her for saying, sitting there looking sad, and I'm like, you have no clue what I'm feeling right now.
Sort of like being a tourist, right?
Yeah, kind of. And I was like, you have no clue what you're talking about. And then I thought, and I'm so happy you don't, because I don't want you to feel what I'm feeling right now. And if this helps you not having to feel this when it's like when you have to deal with this because you got more tools to deal with it, that is actually great and amazing. And she is not saying, now I know what it feels like. She's saying, I think I got an ID. And I think that is very important, because a lot of people think that, oh, so you think you know how it was in the 80s when people around you died? And I'm like, absolutely not. But I think I could have a slightly bigger understanding than I did before. But of course, it's not the same thing. That would just be stupid to say that. But it could help me trying to be more empathic about it, and trying to understand and share and listen to experiences from others, which I think is very important.
Well, I guess interacting with human beings living in a society is not about 100% identification. It's about empathy. It's about understanding, having an idea of what people are going through, because fundamentally we're all the same animal, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even if we don't all have the same traumas, we will have and we will experience different traumatic things in our life. And we can relate through that to other people also. And this is a way to explore that. And I understand that people could say, that's horrible. You were sitting there crying because your dad and your best friend were dead. And I'm like, yes, but it's also closure. It's also good. Like if you ever lost someone, you know that also some of that crying feels really good. It's not just bad. So for me, that was just a good experience. And I was sitting next to someone who started crying, and I realized this was during the funeral scene, and I realized this person is not crying as a character. This person is crying for real. He has lost someone in his life, because I can see that this is real sorrow, and I can relate. And after we talked, and he had lost his sister in cancer, and we connected so hard, because we could share and talk about this experience through the experience of the Larp. And we got really, really good friends after that. And that is something a lot of these kind of heavier themed emotional Larps do very well. They help you connect with other people, and you create new bonds with people in a very short amount of time, because you share a strong experience. It's just like when people go to, I don't know, confirmation camps, Christian camps, they come back and are like, what? Because we go into this little bubble and experience something special. And that's what happens. And that's amazing and beautiful.
So I want to talk now about your designing, and specifically your sort of designing of educational LARPs. So explain to me what an educational LARP is. How do you fold in, sort of, you said your first one was talking about algebra. How do you fold in educational aspects with LARP, and how does LARPing help kids learn?
An educational LARP is a LARP that is designed with a specific learning experience in mind, a specific learning outcome. You can, of course, learn things from every LARP, but they are not designed specifically for that purpose. And that's the big difference between an EduLARP and a standard LARP. And what we do, a lot of the LARPs we do are based on the curriculum. We start with the curriculum, look at it and say, okay, they are going to learn about this. How can we design a LARP around this that helps them relate to this and understand this better? And I think we all have experiences where we've done something and tried something that was very different, where we learn a lot more than just reading about it. And that's where LARPs are great. For learning, it's really good to understand complex systems and emotions. Not as good for like learning facts. I mean, you can do that, but there are probably different other ways of teaching that are better at that. So you need to see it as a tool and use it for what it's good for. And what is very important with an educational LARP is also, like, usually we come out, we workshop with the kids, try to, like, or grown-ups for that matter. We also work with grown-ups. And you, like, go through what is a LARP, what is your character, what are we going to do, and so on. And then you run the LARP, But then after the LARP, you have a discussion where you talk about why did we do this, what did we learn from it, and how does this tie into the ordinary school system. And that's where the real learning happens. You need to facilitate discussion, otherwise they can take something out that you don't want. Usually in LARP you have a lot of conflict, so you might have characters that think different things, and then you need to bring that up and talk to them, like, your character did this. Where did that come from? Well, because he wanted to do this and this and this. Okay, and how is that in real life? Do we have people who do that? And help them and facilitate that discussion to make it clear what the learning outcomes are.
And how difficult is buy-in from the participants? And is it much easier to get kids to buy into a process like that than it is adults?
Depends on their age. I mean, working with someone who's, I don't know, from 10 to 12, that's amazing and magic because it's super, super easy. That's like the golden age for us. The younger kids have a very easy time with like playing make-believe, going into that, but they have a hard time staying within the system sometimes, and they can like flutter away. Grown-ups are usually good sports and try to kind of at least go into it. The hardest stage, I would say, it's when they're 14 and way too cool to play. They hang out, they don't play. We're not kids anymore. Like that's the hard part. But they're also really, really fun to work with because you just need to workshop and make them get the alibi of playing a character and make it like, it's not you doing this, it's your character, and then it's okay. And help them with that process so they feel safe, and then you could have the most amazing discussions after, and they can do things you never saw coming, which is really fun.
And so what are the sort of pragmatic, practical, real-world challenges of running a business like this? Kind of how much money do you make? How difficult is it to get contracts? Do you have an office that you rent out? And is that super expensive and all of those things?
Well, I see it as working with culture. So, of course, that is always hard. You usually don't get rich. I would love to get rich from this, but I probably won't. But I mean, I can live from it. I make enough money to survive and go on holidays and go on LARPs. I mean, that's good. And I mean, we have an office. We've been doing this for 8 years. We have loads of stuff since we always bring costumes and everything for the LARPs. And I mean, having 60 woolen tunics to bring for kids, you need to make the money to make that happen. But of course, it also depends on what country you're in and how it looks. I mean, a lot of the money we make comes from being in schools doing LARPs, and we can do that not because the schools pays themselves, but because the government has put away money for cultural experiences in schools where the school apply for those money. So, and that's what they use to pay us. And that is not something most countries have. So, of course, that's a different situation. But we also do LARPs with companies where we help them understand different subjects. Like everyone at our IT company understands the idea of that, like equality is a good thing. On a theoretical level, everyone understands this here. But we also see in our evaluations that women and people who are not from Sweden are not as happy. So obviously something is not working here. Could you help us with this? Could we work with getting the perspective of not being like the one who is the white male and intellectually understand, but how do we emotionally understand it? And that is something we also do. And then, of course, we can charge a bit more than we can if we go to a school. But it also needs us to do things in a very different way when we work with them. We won't put them into like funny latex ear and silly hats, because that's not what that experience is going to be about. So, yeah.
And is there any particular EduLARP that you've designed that you're particularly proud of?
That is a hard question because a lot of the LARPs we have like co-designed is not, I'm not doing it myself, it's me and my colleagues and so on. But we just did one that I really, really like. It's for 6 to 9-year-olds about math. And that was really hard because in Sweden you don't start school until you're 7. So 6-year-olds are just started or actually in preschool. So we need to make a LARP where some of the participants actually don't know any math yet. They have not started studying that. Or if they're 9, they've been studying math and they know some about it for a couple of years, and it need to work, and it need to be short because we can't do like 6 hour, because they don't go to school for that long and they can't keep focused that long. So you need to make it simple. But we did a really fun LARP where they play cool agents that solve really hard quests, and now something has gone wrong. So we have the decimal error, we call it. Something has gone wrong and all of a sudden their decimal has moved. So all of them are usually between 60 and 80 years old, and the oldest and most experienced agents, and now they're 6 or 8. So we put them in like a nice shirt with a tie. It's just that it's a grown-up one, so it looks huge on them. And we're like, oh no, you've gotten younger. Something is wrong. We need to figure out what happened. And then they need to do quests and really simple math exercises about like what's the biggest and what's the smallest. Who is the oldest and who is like sorting things and stuff like that, which is what you do in math in that age. Very basic concepts. And they need to program a robot to make it do correct things, and so on. And then they figure out that something went wrong with the robot, and that's where the error come from, and they fix it, and then they win and end the LARP and becomes grown up again.
So, your next game is called A Series of Interesting Choices, and this is a game about designing games. Does it work as a game, or is it merely an educational tool?
This is a game I played that is designed by a Swedish game designer, and we use it sometimes with our students when I teach game design at the university, which is great. And this is me gaming your podcast. How do I, and I know I'm not the first one, like how do I bring a game that could give me more games? And this is exactly what that is. And I think it is actually a game in itself, which is very impressive and it's super simple. You have cards. I think it's online for free or at very low cost, if I don't remember wrong. And you have cards, and they're based on the MDA model. So it's mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. And you get kind of like poker, you get a number of cards and you can make some changes. And then you have to design something with the cards you have, where you have those mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. And everyone is supposed to do this. And you need to write down the rules also. And then you pass it along. And then you're supposed to instruct the other players in one of the other players' games. So you need to actually practice writing rules also. And you can come up with really good games doing this, because you will also vote and you will have a winner, what game was the best game. But it helps you like put your creativity in a direction and helps you come up with short, simple, fun games. And we, like some of the games we made just having fun playing it, we've actually kept playing because they were good enough to be interesting, even if it was like simple card games. So I think it's very well designed and easy to use. Of course, it's not something I would ask my mom to do. It's like you need to have some experiences with games, but you don't have to have done a lot of game design before. You could it's a very easy way in to start playing with it and trying out it.
And so who would you recommend this game to?
I would say, like anyone who has played some board games at least and started thinking about the system in the game, like how does this work or why does this happen, that is enough, I think, for you to be able to play it and have fun with it. And if you just want to start designing and thinking about designing, it's also great. And just to get a lot of games really quickly.
So I want to go on now and talk about your teaching work. You mentioned it just now that you teach game design at 2 universities. So what do you teach and what approach do you take to the subject?
I teach on a master level, which is interesting since I'm finishing my own bachelor. But there is a reason. I'm doing together with a professor. So it's not my own courses. And I'm there since I come from an educational background and have a different perspective. And we have 2 courses I'm involved in, and one is Introduction to Game Studies. That is, the point of that is more about showing how you, from an academic point of view, can look at games from different perspectives. It's both like showing you can look at it from gender studies, you can look at it as art, you can look at it as a system, and trying to show different ways of looking at games and analyzing games. And the other course is more focused on doing, even if it's still academic. And that is where they actually get to design their own board game while using some of the theoretical frameworks we give them to help them analyze. Like the MDA that I mentioned before is one of them, for example, and game design patterns and so on, and try to start designing. And that course is called Gameplay Design.
So how useful do you think teaching of game design is? And it seems to exist in very few sort of higher education institutions at the moment. Do you think it should be much more of a normal topic, sort of like media studies, which is, of course, ubiquitous now?
I don't know, because I think in Sweden we have 3 or 4 universities, maybe 5 actually, that teach game design. And we have a bunch of those other kind of educations that I told you about that we have in Sweden that is more practical. So we have quite a lot. And the problem is, I think a lot of the game design industry, like they want to hire people, but they mostly want to hire really experienced people. And that is something we don't really have in the game industry, because most people, like the numbers right now are that people quit within 5 years because the industry is not great. It needs to get better. And I think I'm not sure we need more educations. I'm not sure that is actually what we need. I think we need to see how we can apply game design in different ways. I think that's more interesting, and I think that's more what a lot of game designers are going to do, because it's about looking at systems. And I think that is also, a lot of people are really bad at that. I'm thinking about the classical, you have a sales department, and they say, well, right now you're going to get an extra bonus if you bring in a new customer. Okay, what is the consequence of that choice? And that's where people stop thinking. They think we're going to get a lot of new customers. Okay, but if no one is going to work on the old customers, about keeping them, about making them happy, because they don't get money for that. They don't get anything. They don't get a bonus. So you're going to maybe lose all your customers you have. And that's really bad. And that is a consequence. As a gamer, that is kind of obvious that might happen. But for a lot of people, it's not. And I think those are the kind of things that you can learn within game design and use. But then you need to also show that. And that's why I think we need to go away from classic, we're going to teach you game design and go into the game industry and you need to love games. I think we need more people that don't love games within studying game design, because I think that would actually help the industry overall. So no, not necessarily more game design. Maybe in a different way in that case.
So your next game then is a big narrative game, and this is Tales of the Arabian Nights. I mean, as a LARPer, how important is narrative in board games for you?
It's, for me personally, it's really, really important. It's very clear that I really like games that have narrative, or where I can kind of create my own narrative on it. I do that a lot. I know people I play with get annoyed because I keep doing the choice. We played one with, I don't remember the name of it, but you're supposed to collect really cute little animals and then sell them. And they're like, oh, you got an animal that is great, and now you can sell it to this customer and get loads of money. And I look at him and I'm like, have you seen this customer? Would you sell a dog to this person? He's apparently not going to be a good pet owner. I'm not going to sell it to him. And they just look at me like, but that's the point of the game. I'm like, look at him. Have you seen that? No way. So I bring the narrative to all I do. I have a really hard time like turning it off. And that's also why I love Tales of the Arabian Nights, because it's kind of like Nordic LARP. It's about telling interesting stories. Winning or losing is not that important. It's about what kind of crazy stories that can come out of it. And usually you get the good crazy stories if it goes really well and you do really crazy stuff. Or if it goes really badly, horribly bad, then it's really funny stories coming out of it. And I really like that.
And which brings me to my next question. Is it a game? Or is it an activity? I've not played it, but I've watched videos on it. It seems to me that there's no sort of strategy involved. You just let the game happen to you. Is that right?
I would say it's way more of a game than a LARP is. Because there is a strategy, definitely. There are, like, if you should think that you're in a fairy tale. If you do actions that would fit in a fairy tale, that will give you more points, that will lead to better things. You can also strategically choose what kind of, because you can get better at, what do you call them? You have different abilities. So depending on what abilities you choose, that will affect your game. So you can be strategic about what you choose. I would definitely say it's a game. But I mean, on the other hand, I would also say LARP is a game. And in most definitions of games, LARP, especially Nordic LARP, would not fit as a game. So it depends on what definition you use. But I mean, there are winning conditions that are clearly set, which you don't have in LARP. So yeah.
So I read a long time ago 1001 Nights, and I was struck by, frankly, how misogynistic it is, how blasé it is about the notions of slavery. I mean, it evokes a time in the caliphate that our modern sensibilities are frankly disgusted by. Does this game deal with that? And should it deal with that?
That is a really good question, because I would say yes and no. Because what is interesting about the Arabian Nights is that it is actually an Indian story from the beginning. So if you talk to people from like the different Arabic countries, they usually haven't heard about it because it's not from there. So that is also interesting, because is it actually a story about how it could have been, but it's more like the Indian view of what it might have been in a, like there's so many layers there to start with. And then in the game, I would say like it's definitely very, in one way, gendered, but they also have put things in, like if you go to this magic place, you come to the sex change spring, now you have a new gender. And I'm like, oh, I did not see that one coming. That was interesting. So they put things in that are very different. But of course, they're talking about, like, you have beggars coming up to you. You have, like, out in the streets, they talk about having slaves. But you could also become a slave in the game, depending on how it goes for you. And that will affect how you do things. You can become mad. You can become, like, enchanted and loads of different things. So someone else can move your piece instead of you and so on. And I think it stays away from the most misogynistic things in the books and so on. Like, I haven't read the books myself. I'm looking at them right now, but I haven't read them. I've had them for ages, but never read them. So it's not that bad as it seems like the books are. I would definitely not say it is, but I wouldn't say it really like handles or tackles the problem. It's more that it's kind of worked around it, I would say.
So I want to talk now about the future. So what do you have planned for the future with regards to your work in LARPs, and do you see yourself ever designing a board game?
Good question. I don't really know exactly what I'm doing. Right now we're looking at going more into doing LARPs for business and not as much for schools, because it's interesting to work with grown-ups more. So that's where I'm looking at. So hopefully that means that's going to expand. And what was the second part of the question?
And you know, in game design, I mean, you teach game design. Do you see yourself ever designing a game? I don't mean design. I mean designing a game for publication.
I see what you mean. Maybe I have done some of it. Started like sketching some board games, but I also know how hard it is to make a good board game, and also like the work that goes into the whole part of publishing and making it go around. And even if you have a publisher and you need to pitch it and you need to, I think running my own business has made me kind of, wow, I spend a lot of time selling what I'm doing. And people always think working with LARP means I go around and LARP all day. It means I either game master or I just, most of my time, I run a business. That's what I do with my main part of my time. So I think that kind of pushes me away from making my own board game, because then I would have to at least do parts of that in another area, and some of that is really tedious work. So I think maybe no, because of that.
And so my last question then is, if someone has been inspired by this and they want to get into LARPing, how would you recommend they dip their toe in? Especially if you're like me, for instance, you're cautious about that sort of thing.
Well, I would say there are many ways to do it. Like, you could start looking around, because on Facebook there are LARP communities, different ones where you can find ways to do it. But there is also like, start maybe with some free form that is somewhere in between LARPing and improv and tabletop gaming. There are loads of free, really good scenarios you can download online that you can play with your friends with instructions on how to do it, where you are maybe 4 or 5 people. So it's not a huge, I have to pack everything and go into the forest for a week, because that's kind of a high threshold. But there are these really simple, smaller versions. So I would recommend try something like that, or go to at least in Nordic countries, and I know somewhere at some places in America also, and some places in Europe, they have this like scenario festivals shorts where you go for a weekend and get to play like 2 to 3 short games a day for a weekend and just try different things to kind of see what it can be about and what you like. So that is what I would recommend for starting.
So your last game then is Crown of Emara. What is it about this game that excites you?
I picked this one because I realized I brought my game that is about story. I brought my LARP, since I'm a LARPer. I brought a very easy game to start with, and I brought something about narrative. But I mean, I play a lot of board games, like more Euro games also. I play about 100 different games a year, so I play a lot of board games. And I wanted something that represent that. And I like Euro games, but they can't, like, if they're extremely complex, then I kind of get bored. I don't want to play ahead. I don't want to plan ahead. Like, 8 moves ahead. 2 moves ahead, great. 8 moves ahead, board, something like that. And Crown of Emara we played recently with a couple of friends, and I realized we all like pretty different types of games. We're all like hardcore board gamers, but we like very different games. But all of us really appreciated this game and had a really good experience. And that is one of the reasons I choose it, because I could play that with board gamers that like other types. But I mean, I could also have picked another standard like that are good and fun and stuff. But I don't know. I this was the latest one I played that I thought was fun and interesting, and that's why I picked that.
So, one last question then. So you're heading off to the cabin, and you're herring down the road, 88 miles an hour. The car goes round the corner. Your back door flies open. 5 of the games fly out of the car, down a ravine, into a river, and are swept away to eternity. Which game do you hope is sitting in the backseat of the car?
I'm going to say a series of interesting choices. And that's because I think I could recreate some of the other games with help of that. And most LARPs, I don't have a LARP in a box. I could just improvise a LARP or write it down with pen and paper. So I don't need to bring that in that way. So that's why I'm gonna go for the gamist answer.
So if people want to get hold of you, see what you're up to, potentially give you work, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I would say LinkedIn is a very good way of finding me and connecting with me. I have a Twitter, but I barely use it at all. It's Silver Bubble on Twitter, but I would say it's better to just go through my LinkedIn. You could also contact me on email or check in the website for my business. We have 2 different ones, but I'm going to give you the one that is slightly easier if you're not Swedish, and that is Le Creative. You could think Look Creative, but with a K instead of a C. So lookcreative.se. And then my email would be josefin@lookcreative.se.
Excellent. Well, Josefin Westborg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can support the show in many ways. You could tell your friends. You could talk about it on social media. You can talk about it in your own blog, podcast, or video. Or you can support it directly by going to patreon.com/5G4D for a rolling donation, or for a one-off donation, hitting the PayPal link at the bottom of the website, 5gamesfordoomsday.com. It's these donations that keep the show going. Also, if you want to say something nice about the show, or if you want to say something horrible about the show, you can contact me on Twitter at 5gamesfordoomsday, or send me an email at 5gamesfordoomsday@gmail.com. And if I've managed to pull away from the rotund and boorish men and the ever-present 0-hour contracts, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another 5 Games for Doomsday.